Hello, everybody. Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you're calling us or joining us from around the world. Welcome to this live Prezi webinar. We have Peter Trix with us from SalesGenetics. Hi, Peter. How you doing? So we still have a few people logging in, so we're going to give them a minute or two to get settled. And whilst I do that, or whilst we do that, I'll introduce myself a little bit. So my name's Spencer Waldron. I'm the Global Director of Brand Communications here at Prezi, and I am based in the lovely Amsterdam, although the weather's not very lovely at the moment, in the Netherlands. Peter, where are you joining us from today?
I'm joining from Düsseldorf in Germany.
Düsseldorf, Germany. Awesome. Okay, so I think we're about ready to go. Thank you, everybody, for joining us for today's webinar. It's called How to Professionally Engage with Remote B2B Customers. We have Peter Trix, who's the CEO and co-founder of SalesGenetics, and myself, Spencer Waldron from Prezi. So there's many things that I want to tell you about Peter, but we'll get to that in a minute. And first, I want to take us through a few different housekeeping things. Yes, we will be recording this webinar, and yes, we will be sending it to you afterwards. So there's no worries there. The webinar will run for a maximum of 1 hour. Both Peter and myself will do a little bit of talking and presenting, and then we're going to have time for Q&A at the end of the session. Please ask questions. I always think that's the reward, if you like, for turning up live, that you get to ask questions. And you can ask questions in a couple of different ways. You'll see in the Zoom window that there's the Q&A button and there's the chat button. So the Q&A button, if you use that for questions for Peter or myself and the content that's presented, and then myself and others behind the scenes can make sure we get those questions ready for the Q&A section. And the chat button is for everything else. So you can talk to each other, comment on what's happening on screen, or ask other questions for us that are not related to the speakers. So Q&A button, everything for Peter and content on the screen, and the chat button for everything else. So maybe let's test out the chat button. Maybe in the chat box, just tell us, where are you joining us from? Where in the world are you? Like I say, I'm from Amsterdam at the moment, and Peter's joining us from Düsseldorf. Who have we got? We have California, Amsterdam, Sweden, Belgium, Oregon, Canada. Wow, it's too fast, I can't keep up. Indonesia, Minneapolis, San Francisco, Poland, Portugal, Tokyo, really everybody from around the world. So welcome, everybody. Okay, so let's talk a bit about Peter before he kicks off with his presentation. For those of you who don't know Peter, he's the founder and owner of SalesGenetics. For the past 20 years, he's helped B2B customers transform their sales DNA, create more customer value in the way that they sell, and establish new sales performance standards. Since the outbreak of COVID, Peter has been pioneering digital customer engagement and has been sharing really innovative ways on how you can engage with customers during times when sellers can't visit them. So today, Peter is going to talk to us about how virtual selling can be more engaging. And at this point, I'm going to hand the floor over to Peter, who is going to start today's presentation. So Peter, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Spencer, and thank you for this introduction. So the question is, what can you expect today? First of all, I'd like to make sure that we create a common understanding of the customer's buying journey and how that has actually changed through the pandemic. Then we also want to take a sales perspective on that, and that means how can we create memorable value-added moments along that buying journey, helping the customers in that buying journey and also differentiating ourselves from the competition. And of course, we're going to take a very close look at how to create digital magic moments along that buying journey. And last but not least, I want to take an outlook on how the pandemic has changed selling in the future. So with that, let me just start here and go into the understanding of the customer's buying journey. The typical buying journey in a B2B environment. And this applies to you if you're selling complex products, but also if you're selling even, some solutions or products that are require a bit more explanation, and also maybe moving from a product sale to more of a value sale. And of course, in that context, the customer many times isn't in the early stages even aware of the fact that they have a problem. The markets are changing, pressures on the customer, and they have to rethink their strategy, and they have to identify new initiatives. And that typically is when the executives of the organization figure out that they actually need to do something. And once they've done that, and once they have assigned a budget for it and made it a priority, then of course they have to, get some of their managers in the organization and find out what is out there that we need to purchase. So what solution can help us? Many times you might get a request for information to identify what are the possible solutions there. And then at some point in time, the customer, once they understand the possible solution, they have to specify this in further detail so that they can send out a request for proposal or ask a number of suppliers to maybe provide a proposal. Now, one would think that this is a linear journey, but many times what happens is that actually once the customer has issued a request for proposal, they suddenly realize there's other solutions out there. There's maybe something that they haven't thought of. So therefore, this buying journey is not necessarily a linear journey. It's actually sometimes going back and forth in that journey until the point where the customer can finally say, well, here's a partner that we want to work with that has the best solution. So this, of course, is the core process. But along that process, as you can imagine, there's a lot of validation that is going on. That's why they're going back and forth on that process and really making sure that they have the right solution in place that solves their problem. And even more time is spent on building consensus, because in a complex B2B environment, you have to make sure that everyone is on board, that the right people in the organization support this, that the users are on board, and making sure that you will actually get a return on what you have purchased. And that is the key part. And we got to ask ourselves, to what extent are we supporting the customer in the validation and also in building consensus? So with that, I would like to ask a few questions, and we're going to use the Q&A function for that. And my first question is, what percentage of the buying journey do you think is already completed by the time the customer contacts the salesperson? And the possible answers I'm going to give you here is it 40, is it 50, or is it 60%? The second question is, how much time are customers spending with suppliers or with vendors along that buying journey? Is it 17, is it 21, or is it 25%? Spencer, can you take a look at the answers that we're getting here?
Yeah, sure. For the first question, there's a lot of people going for the 60% answer. A few for the others, but a lot for 60%. And for the second one, it looks like 17% is the most popular at the moment.
Good, good. That means we have a lot of people that are facing reality here, because yes, it is 60%. And imagine what you're missing if you only get engaged in that buying journey once 60% of that journey is completed. In the past, sales had a lot more airtime with customers in the early stages, but today the customers use white papers, analysts, information that is publicly available on the internet to form their opinion and understand what are they going to buy, and therefore the 60% is correct. Now, interesting on the other one, it's only 17% of the time that they're spending with vendors. If there's 2 or 3 vendors involved, that time might even go down to maybe 5 or 6%. So as a result, we have very few touch points with our customers today. And that is the one thing that we need to consider, is how can we make sure that every single of these touch points is a memorable value-added moment, is where the customer says, I really want to work with you because you can do more for me than I can do myself, or I can do with any one of your competitors. So with that, if we just take on the sales perspective now and say, well, what does it mean for us if we get involved that late? So here's the example: you get involved at 60% of that journey, then you will be considered a supplier. You'll be considered one of many suppliers. And guess what? Price is probably the most dominant topic you're going to talk about. You're very dependent on your company to provide a product that is either superior or to provide a superior price. Now, if you do and get engaged early in that process where you maybe shape the request for proposal, you give some new ideas, you shape the project, and therefore the customer will consider you potentially as a business partner because you're adding more value in that process. And they're most likely to prefer you in that process because of the additional value that you've provided. But if you have the opportunity to initiate new business with the customer, where you bring a new idea to the customer, where you say to the customer, you know what, I've looked at your market and knowing this market, knowing the industry, we've seen the following changes. And have you thought about the effect that it actually has on your business? And thereby you're bringing new ideas to the table. This is where the customer says, I want to do business with you because you can do more for me than I can do myself, or I can do with any of your competitors. And this is ultimately, of course, where you want to be, but you will not get there with every customer relationship. But you can ask yourself the question, in the majority of your cases today, are the customers considering you as a supplier because you're getting late involved? Are they considering you as a business partner? Or you have a few relationships where they consider you as a trusted advisor? So customer engagement is key. At the end of the day, we have to recognize that people still buy from people. Although it's a lot more difficult to meet customers, particularly during a pandemic right now. And we're going to talk about how that has changed the way we sell to customers. So the question you got to ask yourself, is your sales process aligned to this customer buying journey? And in order to do that, I would like to take a closer look and understand really how customers are buying. And what we're doing here, we're using an illustration, a racetrack, to illustrate the customer's buying journey, starting from identifying the problem, exploring the solution, building the requirements, and selecting a supplier. Now, remember, this is where we get involved. Yeah, this is late in the process. And you think about what are all the activities that the customers is going through before we actually get involved, if the statistics prove themselves right. So with that, let's take a closer look at that. And what you see here is, of course, a generic version, but it helps us to understand what's happening actually. So what you see here in the early stages, the customer identifies a need. That need can be initiated either through a consultant, through some internal studies. They realize some changes in the market, and therefore they realize they need to do something. Then they have to make it a priority, put a budget behind it, maybe specify the requirements, identify potential suppliers, get some offers, evaluate the offers, select a supplier, build a business case, and so forth. Now, your particular buying journey is probably a lot more complex. And that's what I suggest to take a look at, because only once you understand that detailed buying journey, then of course you can identify what else can we do. What I highly recommend is to think about what is the unique customer experience that you want to create at the end of each step of the buying journey. So for example, the customer should maybe say at the end of the buying journey that you, as a partner here, you have understood their business and potential challenges and have brought yourself into play with new ideas as a provider of trust. Yeah? And you can see the other unique customer experience. But again, what I'm trying to say here is that unless you make these touch points with customer a unique experience, you will probably be considered one of many. So people still buy from people. So therefore, we need to make sure that we create a unique buying experience that will make them consider us as a business partner, or maybe even as a trusted advisor. So once we understand that unique experience, then we can get very creative, because now we want to identify these memorable value-added moments, these touch points, whether they're live touch points when we still can visit customers again, or whether they're digital touch points. So for example, an idea could be, well, why don't we spend a day in the life with a customer? Offer the customer to spend half a day with the users of your solutions, and identify, what are they doing? Are there opportunities to maybe for improvement, for efficiencies, and understand more about their process? how do you pitch some new business? So now you've generated a couple ideas. How do you pitch that to the customer and put it in the context of the challenge that you've observed and the business outcomes that you actually generate for them? Creating a collaborative action plan early in the process, where you align already at that stage the activities that your customers is going through and the activities that you're going through. Qualifying the opportunity together, or creating individual value propositions, making sure that you get access to the key stakeholders and give them a reason to talk to you or to support you. A value proposition for a purchasing manager is obviously a different one than it is for a IT manager or a marketing manager, depending on what solution you're providing. So therefore, making it individual to them. Doing a joint competitive analysis. Don't leave the customer on their own. Try to get the customer involved into the competitive analysis and understand how they evaluate you versus the competition, so that you know what you need to do differently in order to compete. Setting traps, creating a winning pitch. I'm going to show you an example of that in a moment. How to create ROI business cases and so forth. So there could be many more memorable value-added moments. You have to put yourself into the customer's shoes. So we use a design thinking approach here in order to come up with these ideas that will actually make a difference. And many of those, as you see here, are ideas that can be turned into digital magic moments at times where you cannot visit the customer. So with that, of course, the question is, how do you do that? And this is where I would like to hand over to Spencer, and Spencer will show you all the bells and whistles that you can actually do with a technology like I'm using here, and that is, of course, Prezi Video.
Okay, thanks, Peter. Yeah, let's talk about how you can use Prezi Video in your virtual sales meetings, because we're all trapped in this tiny little box. Now, I want to do that by focusing on 3 key areas. The first is attention. How do we get somebody's attention in the first place? Because it is a noisy market out there. Once we've got their attention, how do we keep it? And more importantly, how do we keep people engaged? If you have a 20-minute video call with somebody and it seems like everybody's attention spans are pretty short, how do I keep somebody engaged? So I want to cover a couple of things that you can use Prezi Video for that as well. And third is problem solving. How can we use this tiny little box to show our prospects how we can solve their problem? So 3 probably critical things that we all feel these days when we're doing virtual selling. But before I jump into those, I just want to focus on agenda, because there's something very powerful about bringing on agenda onto the screen with you like this in a way that allows you to be a lot more conversational. And Peter's already hinted at this, and I know he's going to show a little bit more about this, but the ability to have a presentation on the screen that, instead of saying, okay, I'm just going to go through my whole 20-minute deck, is to say to that person, thank you for giving me 20 minutes of your time. How can we best spend it? And it's this idea that if we're lucky enough to get on a video call with somebody, they've already done their research. As we saw earlier from Peter, 60% of the sales journey could already be done. So what they have is a gap in their information. And our job when we get onto that kind of video call is to hunt out, okay, what's the gap in the information? So if you and I were talking on the screen, you might say to me, Spencer, I'd love to know more about how Prezi Video can help spike engagement in a video call. And then I'll just go straight into that topic and start presenting. So consider how you can use video in this kind of more conversational way, because we've definitely seen salespeople from around the world have a lot of success by doing that as well. So let's kick into attention. How do we get somebody's attention in the first place? And I want to cover 2 different ways of doing that. First is through pre-recorded video, and second is live, like we're doing here today. Now, most of us are starting our virtual selling journey on social media platforms like LinkedIn. And what we're seeing is not only is video a mega trend in the world anyway, even before the last 12 months, but we're definitely seeing that social media reward video content. Why? Because that's how people want to consume content. So this is an example of a video that I put onto LinkedIn last week. And it was some thoughts and ideas I had around a possible pain point. I created a short video, and you can see very quickly, I got up to 1,600 views. And I'm not somebody with, millions of followers or anything like that. So we can use video in this way to be super, not only engaging, but to get attention. So let's look at a couple of examples. Now, what you can start to see is, and this first one is an example of a video about storytelling. Now, when I watched that video, in 2 minutes, I learned a lot of information. And it's this idea of speed to value, that you can create a video and that your prospects can see something and get that value, because we haven't got lots of time. We don't want to read a 20-minute blog post to get the same amount of value. So speed to value is important. The second is standout. When you see something like this in your video feed, it stands out. When we're scrolling by and you see something, you see somebody moving, you see some nice visuals. So it immediately kind of gets somebody's attention. And if it's the right content, then they'll be interested to read it. And third is obviously you are able to showcase either a problem or a pain point that they might already know, or maybe one that they don't know, which can be even more powerful if it's something that they want to know the solution for. So there's lots of ways that we can use pre-recorded video in that way. But I think that live video is hands down the most powerful way to use a tool like Prezi Video. The idea of bringing this content onto the screen with me, like we're doing today in this meeting. Now, if I show you some examples here from webinars that other people have done, you can see here, this is Tiffany Bover from Salesforce, that it's really a great way to hold attention when you're in that meeting. Because they see you keep that connection between you. There's a lot of movement happening on the screen with your visuals and with your body and your face. And we know from Hollywood that movement is the gateway to attention. That's why nowadays when you watch a movie, they use jump cuts and scene changes every 3 seconds, let alone 30 seconds, because movement spikes dopamine in our brain and makes us pay attention. So we can use movement like this to keep attention over a longer period of time. So that's attention. What about engagement? How can we keep people engaged for longer periods of time? And I already started to hint at this. Now, if there's one thing that you remember from what I say in these short 10 minutes that we are together, is that don't hide behind the slide. Because what we see all over the place at the moment is people are doing this. And the second I take my camera feed away and I have something static up on the screen, it starts getting pretty hard to stay engaged and to keep paying attention. And this is when you're going to start checking your phone or letting the dog out or putting something in the oven for dinner. So what we need to do is maximize the amount of time that you're on the screen. Keep that human connection with somebody is really, really powerful to keeping them engaged. Now, not only can you do that, you can also start to be really interactive with your content in a way that shows the value that you can bring. So I just picked one small example, which is bringing up a chart or some data into a meeting, which many of us have to do. Now, normally what happens is, we put that chart up on the screen and then people stop listening to us because they're trying to figure out, okay, what does that chart say? What does it mean? Now, with Prezi Video, I can bring up the chart like this. And if I've done my job properly here, look, you can see I've removed everything that's not important and turned it to gray. And what I want you to look at is that nice bright yellow line, which is like a hockey stick. And let's face it, we all love charts that are like a hockey stick and go up and to the right. So straight away, that focuses the audience's attention on, this is what I want you to look at. And then I can say, I wonder what happened here where this huge success started to happen. And then I can bring in the salient points, like they started doing conversational presenting, started using Prezi Video, and they stopped screen sharing their slides. Okay, a bit tongue in cheek, but you get the idea. It's this ability to bring the message alive in a way that's engaging and you can hold people's attention over time. So that's engagement. What about problem solving? How can we show people how we can solve their problems? Well, again, there's a number of things that we can use. So you've already seen Peter and myself both presenting the same Prezi on this webinar today. And this starts to be super powerful because if you're in a call with a prospect and you can have 2 or 3 people from your organization on the call at the same time, and you can hand over, it brings a variety of expertise and different ways of seeing the same problem or the same solution. So again, it's a very powerful thing to have multiple people presenting on the call at the same time. Now, you can also obviously create content or a Prezi video about your product itself, and you can show it on the screen, and you can obviously have, these are the benefits that it brings. But if you really want to, you can take it even a stage further, because I can bring my whole product onto the screen. So imagine for a second that I am in charge or selling a product that is to do with a smart city. So I can bring up the city on the screen and I can say, so this is where we're putting our 5G mesh network, for example, and here's where we're going to put the load balancing architecture. So this way, I start to really bring it alive and people can see, okay, this is the problem that I have and this is how they solve it. I can even zoom in and go into more detail. I can say, hey, Peter, I see your corner office there in that tower block. So you can do something that really gets across, here's not only the problem that you feel, but here's how we can help solve it in a way that's incredibly visual and incredibly interactive. So that's it from me. 3 things or 3 areas that you can potentially use Prezi video for when we're all trapped in this little box. And with that, I'm going to hand it back over to Peter.
Excellent, Spencer. Thank you very much for sharing that. It looks to me like the possibilities are endless with the technology that you have here. And the question is, how can you turn that into a engagement with a customer at a time where you cannot visit them? And one of the examples from a magic moment that we've identified earlier is how to create a winning pitch. And I'd like to show that to you. And the winning pitch is basically the ability to, throughout the sales process, to engage the customer and make sure that you help them in building consensus. So, when other people come on board, to make sure that we're all aligned to the right solutions and validating that they have the right solutions. And many times what salespeople do is they create, this is almost like an executive summary, and they create the executive summary at the end of the sales process and put it into their proposal. But the key is to engage the customer in that process. And my recommendation would be, even after the first customer meeting that you have, summarize your understanding of their requirement. What is your draft of a solution that you want to sell? What are the benefits for them? And give them good reasons why to continue to work with you. And if you do it that way, and here's an example of a customer that we've been speaking to, where I summarized the key requirements, and I'm just putting 4 bullet points here, obviously addressing the limitations caused by COVID-19, understanding the customer's buying journey changes, creating some new sales performance standards that are aligned to them, and establishing a coaching process within the business. So those were the requirements. And based on that, when somebody else get involved, so let's say there's a new person I'm talking to, I'm having another web meeting with somebody, I say, well, this is what the rest of the team told us. Is there anything else from your side that we need to include here? And that way you always make sure that you build the summary, the executive summary, with the customer together. Then the next thing is you're going to talk about your solution. So let's talk about the solution. We use a design thinking approach to validate the customer's buying journey. We create a common methodology. Again, these could be your key bullet points on the solution that you're selling. And that way you can also, again, make sure that the customer sees, yeah, that's the solution you're getting. Is there anything else that you're expecting from us? Or are there other solutions that this needs to be integrated to? So you create a more common understanding on their view of what the solution should look like. And then most importantly, you build it into the context of the business outcome. And what we do here is we even group it by stakeholders, say, for sales management, here's your benefit, for sales is your benefits. So that way you make sure that you have everyone involved in getting the solution and getting the support for the solution that you're selling. And again, you can still ask a question at this point to say, is there anything else that you're expecting, other benefits that we haven't considered here? And then last but not least, you obviously want to talk about why they should work with you. Yeah. So this is a very powerful concept, and it only takes you maybe 15 minutes at the start of the meeting, but that way you make sure that throughout the buying journey, which for some of you I know is probably a 3, 6, 12 months process, throughout that journey, you always make sure that you build something that the customer has worked into, so they can actually use it also for internal selling. And that's the nice thing about Prezi. You can put it live and they can get access to this. You can even see who's accessing the information and what parts they were particularly interested in. Yeah? So not as sophisticated, of course, as Spencer built it. And again, the possibilities are endless, but this is a very simple way. I can build this within 15 minutes and get my key messages across to my customer and engage them in a conversation at a time where I cannot visit them. So with that, then, of course, the last thing, Spencer spoke about this, but don't underestimate this possibility here, because we all are relying on resources in our organization, like the sales specialists that have this knowledge that we would like to get in front of every customer. But the problem is, if they need to visit the customer and take extensive journey, it's very difficult to get them. And here's a possibility where seamlessly you can, just like Spencer and I did, you just switch the background, the video. They all have the same Prezi version live, and they can take their part in the conversation at whatever appropriate time you think it's the right thing to do. And that way you make all your resources that you have available at the customer's desk at a time where it's hardly possible to visit any customer. Think about that competitive advantage that gives you, that many companies are not taking advantage of today. So with that, let's talk about the future. What has COVID done to us? How has the pandemic changed the way we sell? If you think about this, 12 months ago, if somebody would have told you we're going to have lots of meetings using Teams or WebEx or Zoom, I would have said, you're crazy. This is not going to happen. It's going to take us another 5 years for that to happen. And here we are 12 months later, and suddenly life has changed. Customers now got used to have meetings on video conferences. And therefore, I think that has not only changed for the duration of the pandemic. Yes, of course, we're all desperate to visit people again. We're all desperate to shake hands and go to dinners and go to bars. But do you have that to do that for every meeting? I remember me traveling from here to Munich for a 1-hour meeting and traveling back in a plane. It's not going to happen anymore. So I can be much more productive. If you think about it, has taken me a whole day to do that. Now I can use 8 hours of that time to focus on some new business. And the other thing is, what I've experienced is it's a lot easier to get customer meetings for a 20-minute web call. Fairly easy to do, versus getting us on an on-site meeting is a lot more difficult. So this is why I think this is your opportunities. And I think the companies that take advantage of this now during the pandemic are the ones that will come out of this as the winner, because there's a huge possibility for you. We've done the math on this, and you can easily justify the investment into the Prezi technology and the methodologies that you use in order to create digital magic moments. You can easily justify that by the reduced travel costs, but that is not where the benefit is. The real benefit is in the time that you're saving to initiate new business. You can use little video clips that you create, like Spencer showed you. You can send them around through WhatsApp. You can put them on your LinkedIn account and really use the time to initiate new business. And we're all desperate on that. I mean, the pandemic has, forced a lot of us to reduce our resources that we have available. So now the only solution is to generate more business. And, I can also show you a new business pitch on how you do that in a similar way as we just done. And then last but not least, do not underestimate the competitive differentiation. Having a meeting like this with your customer is very different from having a Teams or a Zooms meetings where the salesperson is a little icon on the bottom that is moving. But there's very little impact that you can create as a person there. And as Spencer said, it's very difficult to get people's attention. And if you think about this, probably the majority of the time during this webinar, you looked at me, you didn't look at the content, because I'm delivering, and that's what you want your salespeople to do, to deliver your content, the messages that you want to get across in a very powerful way, as if they would be with your customer on site. So with that, I have 3 takeaways for you before we go to question and answer. First one, traditional conference technology is not the answer to professional customer engagement. Teams, Zoom, WebEx, you name them, they're just the means. They're like a phone line, nothing else, except that they transport video, but it does not provide the answer to professional engagement. Yes, we use them as the transport level here to deliver messages, but the interaction has to come through technologies like Prezi Video here or others. Then, of course, I highly recommend that you try to understand how your customer's buying journey has changed, particularly through the dynamic now, and look for opportunities to create digital magic moments even after the pandemic. And that, last but not least, as I mentioned earlier, don't underestimate the power of leveraging your subject matter experts through a technology like this, and make them much more available to customer meetings, reducing their travel time. And whether they're based in London, San Francisco, Tokyo, doesn't really matter. You make them available at the customer desk, wherever the customer is. And that is very powerful. So with this, I'm very curious on what kind of questions you have for us. And let me give over to Spencer. What questions have we got so far?
Thanks, Peter. Really great presentation. Enjoyed it very much. We have a range of questions, so I'm just going to kick in. There was one from earlier, and I apologize in advance if I say this name wrong, but from Agnita. And she's in a consulting business with very long selling cycles. And she doesn't get contacted as much as that she maybe contacts new clients. So is there any advice for her, like with a long selling cycle?
Welcome to our world. We're exactly in the same situation. And, we obviously don't have a big brand that people call us. So what you have to do is you have to get creative to get through the clutter. Things like we do now is we record little video sequences, like 2-minute videos that get people's attention. I even put customer logos on the video and, create a similar, as you've seen with the binning pitch, a short message to them that grabs their attention. And, send that either, if you have their mobile phone number, send it through WhatsApp, send it through text messages. You can obviously attach it to an email, but I would always try to get to the mobile phone first, and or even use LinkedIn and other social media channels that you can have. And that is very powerful. That has given us a much higher return on traditional prospecting that we've done, and video messages resonate with people, and you just got to make sure you keep them short.
Cool, thank you. So we have another really good question from Tom, and Tom says, does this work for all countries, or do we need to take into account cultural differences?
Oh, that's an interesting one. I would say in the same way as you take account cultural differences when you have a live meeting with a customer. Obviously, when you're selling in Asia, relationship is very important. Now, in this pandemic, it's very difficult to build relationships. But guess what? You build a closer relationship through a means like this than if you just have a pure Teams meeting or Zoom meeting. So therefore, I think this will certainly help to do that. But other than that, I would say, everything else that you use in terms of cultural guidelines when you sell in different countries applies to an online meeting in the same way as it applies to a live meeting. So I wouldn't say there's much difference.
Thank you. Okay, I'll take the next couple of questions. So the first one is from Josh, who's telling us that we're probably missing a huge chance by not having green screen at the back so people can put their branding at the back. So thanks for that, Josh. I'll definitely pass on your views to the product team. That's always our biggest challenge, is of all the amazing directions and things that we can go down. We have to really be careful on what we choose and pick. But thanks for that. I'll definitely pass it on. From Marek, he or she says, I love the examples of the transition effects you are showcasing in Prezi video. Can I get a current copy? Oh, sorry, the questions are moving. Can I get current content you are showing as a template and we can adjust for our Prezis? So yeah, I'll definitely look at that. There may be some assets that I need to take out because of licensing issues. I can't just give it out as it is. But yeah, we'll definitely look at that and then we'll send it out afterwards as well. Okay, so next question is from Maria, and maybe both you, Peter, and I can do this one as well. Maria asks, excuse me, what do you need in terms of practical things to do this type of presenting, i.e. clicker, special webcam, lighting, things like that? So maybe tell us a bit about your setup, Peter.
Well, I have a setup here where I have a separate video camera. I have a large monitor next to that. And I even have a little iPhone, an old iPhone that I'm using as a separate monitor to actually see. And that forces me to look in the camera because the tendency normally would be I look at the screen. And that's something that you have to learn. So you suddenly become a TV moderator where you learn to look into this lens and, therefore, obviously have a much higher impact when you talk to somebody in the lens than if I would talk to the screen. So that's it. It doesn't take more. You don't even have to do that. If I do this from my home office, I just use my computer, my laptop, and with a camera built in, and that's all. It's just that here in the office, I've a bigger setup, and the only thing I actually had to purchase was this camera because monitor and iPhone was available.
Yep, I agree. I'll echo that. Like, for day-to-day calls where you're doing high volume of stuff, then you can just use your laptop, the webcam that comes with the laptop, and you just have the Prezi video app on your desktop, and you're good to go. And I think if you're starting, like we are, where we do a lot of like webinars and live calls like that, then yeah, I suddenly find myself wanting to upgrade lighting and sound and the camera. Because that actually makes a big impact on the audience experience. And I think, and it's really not about spending huge amounts of money. There are some very, kind of good budget options out there, especially for lights. But yeah, it definitely makes a big impact. So yeah, start small and grow from there. Okay. So we have a follow-up question from Agnita. Remember about the kind of more complex selling. Agnita says, when I work as a teacher, my presentations are often also the course material to be accessible after the lectures. When sharing PowerPoint slides, this is possible as I just save them as PDFs and upload them to the students portal. Is this still possible with Prezi? So yes, you can do it two ways. So for example, like you can record the video and then download it as an MP4 and upload it into something like Google Classroom. You can, if you create it in Prezi Present, you can PDF that and upload it in that way. So there's different ways that you can share that content afterwards. So yes, is the short.
If I can add to that,
sure.
we learned it the hard way as well, because when the pandemic hit us, we're very fortunate to learn about Prezi Video, and we decided to take all of our training materials online into this format. And initially we started great things in Prezi, but then we realized actually we can import PowerPoint very, very elegantly here. You can even turn off the background of the PowerPoint and make it transparent on here, and that is very powerful. So that way, what we do is we continue to develop our content in PowerPoint, and then the import, takes you 15 minutes to get it into this format. And that way you can still send out the PowerPoints, you can still maintain your documentation in PowerPoint, so there's no additional effort. It's just that import, which is very seamless.
Yeah. There's a few different questions, which I won't go into each one individually, just around how you can do more with Prezi Video, where you can start, what does it work with. So we'll make sure that we send information about all of those out with the email. I will just say there's a few people asking about, does Prezi Video work with like Google Meet, Microsoft Teams, Zoom, WebEx, all of those? The answer is yes. Basically, all you do is you select the virtual camera. So for example, in Zoom, where you have that little camera icon, you click on it and you choose the Prezi Video virtual camera. So as long as you can choose your camera, you should be able to use Prezi Video, no problem. Same for the trainings. Hang on a second. Some comments about the 3D image on the screen. Yeah, I would definitely, look at finding 3D images, either ones that you've created because it's your product or just in general, because you have a 3D environment to play in. So it definitely helps a lot. We have a question from somebody who's anonymous, but says, I'm afraid in the future that I'll miss the personal meeting with customers. Thanks to business, I could travel around the world. You are not missing it. Well, no, I am for sure. I'll hand it to you in a second, Peter. But I think, for sure, I still miss meeting people and I miss the travel to meet people. But it's a little bit like you were saying earlier, Peter, I'm having such amazing experiences in virtual as well. They're different for sure. But I think it's the more you experiment with virtual and being in this tiny little box, you discover there's an awful lot you can do with it. I don't know about you, Peter. Are you missing travel?
I do. I really do. And I used to do a lot of traveling, and our business was purely on-site training business. Therefore, now it has changed dramatically. I think travel will come back and meeting people will definitely come back, and of course we want to take advantage of that. But if I look at a sales cycle of maybe 10 months, and let's say in that sales cycle I had one meeting every month with a customer, all those meetings were on-site meetings, and not only the time, the cost involved in that. Even if I only reduce it by a third, and use things like that when I get my subject matter experts involved and things like that, that has a huge impact. So just be there with a customer when it's important, but many other meetings you can much easier, particularly when you bring in your team, don't have them all fly into the customer, just bring in them virtually, much more powerful, much more time efficient, and much higher impact for the customer.
Yeah. Excellent. So there's also a few different questions all around similar topics. So I'll try and put them all into one. But people just asking okay, how are we doing it, Peter, you and I, with this? We're looking at the camera, we're moving the graphics backwards and forwards. How are we managing to do all that? Are you using a clicker? So do you want to go first?
Yeah, so I personally use a clicker. I don't always use that, but in this case, I'm using clicker. Every clicker should actually work in this technology, and that makes it a little easier for me to navigate through the slides. But you don't have to. You can easily, click on the page here. And as Spencer said earlier, the nice thing about this is it's conversational. If this is a sales meeting, the customer asks a certain topic, I can move directly into that area rather than having go through the whole slide deck until I get to that point. So. That makes a huge difference. Yeah,
I agree. I think I just saw your clicker. I think we're using the same one. So this is the Logitech Spotlight clicker. So I use that a lot just because I like to move around a bit. So then I'm not always really close to the keyboard. But you can completely use the keyboard to move the graphics. You just use the left and right arrows. And you even have the hotkeys on the keyboard. So if you want to bring your presentation back up, I can just press 1, 2, or 3. 1 is nothing at all, just me. 2 is the graphics, and 3 is I get rid of the feed. So you can use keyboard shortcuts, you can use your mouse, or you can use a clicker. So I think find the thing that works from you. And I think one of the best tips I do is when I'm presenting, I either have the Zoom window or the Prezi Video app window. I have it open and I put it right to the top of the desktop, so it's underneath the camera. So then I'm still looking at the camera, but I can glance down and I see the content in front of me. So that's how I can, put my hand in the right place. But yeah, so lots of questions around that, but it's once you've done it once or twice, you'll soon get the hang of it. Okay, let me just go through some of the other questions. How are we doing on time? We've got time for a few more. Here's one for you, Peter, from Raluca. How many times should we promote our brand or products online before successfully starting the customer journey?
That's an interesting question. I wonder whether you shouldn't start with a customer journey to understand how you promote your products online. So I think there's not necessarily a direct correlation between the two. I think the more you can understand what journey your customers is going through in their buying journey, or what stages they're going through in their buying journey, the better you can understand how to reach them online and promote your brand online. So I think absolutely no direct correlation.
Cool. Here's I've got a question from Francesco, which I think is again, and I'm going to put my glasses on now to join the glasses. So Francesco said that I've been told that movement is keen to keeping attention, and that eye contact is key to real connection. I wear glasses like Peter and can't function without them. What lighting do you recommend for people to see my eyes and avoid any ugly reflective glare on the lenses? So do you want to take that, Peter?
I'm not sure if I can quickly show this here, but here's my setup. Yeah. So you have a little, round thing that I just project from the side, and then I have a light to the top of the screen, and that's all I need. You can buy them; they're readily available now, and that is the light I prefer, because here in Europe it's already dark. Wherever you are in the world, it might also still be light. So you need to make sure that you have a good room lighting, and the key is those two lights, one from the side so it doesn't reflect into your glasses, and the other one to the top to make the room bright enough.
Yeah, I agree. I think, like, if you have the opportunity and you can put your desk in front of the window, so the window's in front of you, and you get all of that natural light onto you, that's the best way for sure. And then you don't get any of the reflection problems. But yeah, failing that, then like Peter said, there are some little ring lights like that do a really great job. Hang on a second. I'm just going through the questions. We've got a few minutes left. Okay, there's some other ones that are getting into more technical areas, so we'll make sure that we follow up on those on the email. So yeah, so I think we'll bring it to a close as we're nearly at the top of the hour. So I just want to say a huge thank you to all of you who joined today's webinar and staying with us all the way through it. I hope you found it thought-provoking and interesting. We'll definitely send out the recording via email, and we'll send it together with any presentations or assets connected to a lot of the questions that people ask. So we'll make sure we send all of those out. Peter, thank you so much for sharing your insight and expertise. Have you got any final words for people?
A final word. How about a quote from Albert Einstein, who once said, "If you do what you always did, you get what you always got." I don't think that's true any longer. I think if we do what we always did, we will no longer get what we always got. So I think it's time for change.
Wow, I'm going to be thinking about that for the next few hours. But I think it's very true. Things have definitely changed. Okay, thanks everybody for your time. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Goodbye, good luck, and let us know how your journey goes selling in this little box. Bye everybody. Thanks a lot.